Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Moffat on Money, Saturday Night Live and Rambling. I'm Clay, joined by the ever gracious Miss E Train, broadcasting from one of our live remote locations.
Come on
Good
now.
to be with you again, another Saturday night.
Another Saturday. Sorry.
Yeah, I started popping in my head too.
Mm-hmm.
Ellen has been working today, putting up a fan, I believe. So
And
just one of her many talents and skills.
towel bars and
Y'all
everything.
need any like renovation work done or whatever, just give her a call.
Just give me a shout out.
It's E-Train Construction.
Okay. Hey then.
She's going to be building a goat pen before long.
Trying to. We'll see.
And we will actually reveal Calliope
Calliope.
a little. Yeah, I knew there was something I'd rolled off wrong there. Calliope a little later in the show.
Mm-hmm.
Jane, good to see you. Welcome. Glad to have you with us tonight. Jane is a longtime and much loved member of the family.
Vince is saying hi to everyone. Hello, Vince. Now go away.
You got your pets. Go away.
Exactly. He doesn't. He disagrees. These lights. Let me try those over there. Sorry. I moved. I have a desk. I moved everything, and things are still a little wonky. I tried it out, but it was before dark, so things changed a little bit. And if I disappear, it's because Vince jumped up on the keyboard. Hang on.
Yeah, most of you are familiar. Those that aren't, maybe new with us tonight. E-Train just moved this week, so it's been busy trying to,
That's a little better.
unpack, set up the house, get everything. She's got a few new pieces in, got a new desk there,
Mm-hmm.
and
Which I know.
still putting things together. It's actually a pretty cool desk. So,
It's a cool desk.
very
Yes.
cool desk.
It's, an American Drew. I think they call it the Skyline desk. It's a great desk. Highly recommend it.
So she just got her Wi-Fi connected a few days ago, I think. So still working out a lot of the kinks.
Yeah, can say that.
Speaking of working out the kinks, we're going to be talking about some of that tonight with what I think is the most popular story in the news this week. The well-known, much loved USDS.gov website. If
What is
you
the
are not
USG? Oh, that is the previous Doge, right?
this is it, U.S. Digital Service.
Mm-hmm.
It was renamed by executive order the U.S. DOGE Service. So they haven't got that changed yet because most everybody has been out of their offices and working elsewhere. But we're going to unpack more of the controversy that's been erupting as the tempo and the anger, a lot of anger this week, continue to pick up.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Hello,
Hello,
Melissa.
Melissa. How are you doing tonight? Hope everything's settling down out there in California. Haven't heard much more on the fires. Are they under control yet? I know you're not in danger, but they have just fallen off the news.
Completely.
Yeah.
And guys, I am watching, by the way, Rumble and X, so feel free to drop a comment or a question, and I will be more than happy to pass it along.
Well,
Yes.
Let's
Oh,
see. The fires were completely out last week. It took nearly a month. Yeah, that's kind of ridiculous. I'm glad they are out. I didn't know whether some new ones had sprung up. I knew they were making progress on controlling the ones they had, but I heard some about a new one starting up. Wind was picking up, so but that's the last I heard of it. But I'm glad that they are out finally.
absolutely.
Been seeing some things about rebuilding going on there, and apparently, my understanding is the city's not going to let everybody rebuild. That if they do, this I saw some mention about taking 20% of the land and using it for low income housing,
Oh,
and people that had a house that didn't match code but were grandfathered in
hmm.
are going to have to rebuild according to code. So
Really?
that's going to be a whole different process and world for them. So don't know how all that's going to end up net working out, but
Interesting.
um, yeah, it's going to be a slow and tedious process. Fair amount of paperwork. The inspectors are going to be swamped and backed up. Um, Contractors are going to be in short supply. I don't know. It's just a mess.
Sorry, I'm trying to move
Well,
the light still. Just ignore me. Ignore the woman behind the curtain.
who's not so much behind the curtain?
Is that any better? I don't know. Figure it out eventually.
It's going to be an ongoing thing for quite some time. But I signed up for Habitat for Humanity again. Good for you.
That's awesome.
They I used to work for them, but it's as I've gotten older, getting up on roofs and doing roofing and all is not quite my forte. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
so, but it's a good group.
I worked with him when I was in high school, actually. Anyhow.
So, all right, we're going to be talking about DOGE, trying to examine some of the controversy, the anger. Um, Little background: government is running a 2.5 trillion deficit, which is the annual shortfall. Got a total of about 37 trillion in debt. It's
Mhm.
paying currently at the rate of 1.7 trillion a year in interest, which will rise this year. And when someone tries to cut the spending, the whole of DC is just screaming bloody murder. This can't happen. I
Oh,
mean,
yes, it
just
can.
angry. Why so angry? I mean, we kind of know why so many are angry. Hell, everyone up there was getting a share of your tax dollars. You know,
Literally.
David Sachs pointed out that, you know, the New York Times is getting paid, Politico, ABC, Reuters, Bloomberg were all getting paid. I mean, in the millions of dollars. Bloomberg got paid 20 million past 3-4 years. Bill Kristol getting paid, Ukraine getting paid, and half the money they don't even know where it went. Uh, we were funding left wing opposition groups in Poland, Hungary, Britain, France, all getting paid. The BBC, the British Broadcasting Company,
We
you
paid
were
them
paying
too.
for.
That
Do
doesn't
what,
sound
Ellen?
right. We were paying for them too?
Yep,
Or
giving
paying them?
them funds.
That's just
And,
wrong.
if you're curious, you can actually go to this website. It's usaspending.gov/search. Easy website to find. And you can, type in whatever group organization you want. New York Times. and then submit it. And in a second, here's all the money going to the Times. 300,000, 144,000, 122,000, 111,000, 109, 97, 80, 71, 71, and it just keeps going on and on and on and on and on. And some people are, saying, a lot of that was for subscriptions. Well, it's funny. Apparently, the vast majority of these subscriptions were never used. So, don't know who was authorizing the payment of subscriptions that nobody wanted or used, but it totaled up a little over $8 million going to the Times. Melissa, I think we're going to need a baby goat swoop.
I just sent her the picture. And she said, "Oh, my goat."
And for those of you not familiar, haven't actually used it in a while, we have the best swoop in all of the internet.
Show me the money! It's good stuff.
Melissa actually fixed that up for us. So I've been remiss in applying it. We'll try to work on that. Now, Green Bean. And Green Bean is Melissa's main man there. She loves her pug. And she is all about the pug life. She's got a website, Love Pug Circus, and Instagram, Love Pug Circus. She works with the rescues, whatever. So if you have an affinity for dogs or whatever, check those out. I can't think of it all.
I know. He is your bestie. He's the best bestie.
And we try to, if for the family members, we try to give them a plug a little bit every now and then. If you've got a website or YouTube channel, Instagram, whatever, let us know. We'll throw it out. Now,
you got to show Calliope now. You got to show Calliope just for a sec.
Not yet.
Gee, you're gonna make him wait.
Yep, go make them wait.
Okay.
For the big reveal.
You're a mess.
We've seen a lot of the news and payments this week from, just the one department, USAID or USAID. I've heard it, I always call it USAID, but I've heard other people refer to it as USAID. So,
now, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I heard rumors that most of it was going to the Clintons, but I can't back that up or.
Well, I was just going to throw out, I think it's almost undeniable that the U.S. aid was nothing more than a huge slush fund. It paid millions to, for example, pressure advertisers to boycott certain news sources, to boycott X. It worked and paid for foreign nations to regulate ad networks so that they could control the information that's available. Does this sound like something a U.S. agency ought to be involved in? It sounds like a propaganda service.
Yeah.
And keep in mind the context. Also, while you're here, don't forget, ring that bell. Do all the little YouTube-y stuff. If you will, just hit that like button. It helps us out a bunch. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Keep in mind the context of all this. Trump, when he was running, he made a number of promises. And over the past couple of weeks, he's been in office, 15, 16 days. He has worked, I think, to keep his pledge to quote unquote turn America around, both economically and in terms of international relations. Well, you can't do much of that if the government itself is a train wreck, if it's disorganized, if it's hugely wasteful, and working with to all sorts of different ends and objectives. You've got different little fiefdoms, each, pushing their own agenda. So his first focus, and I believe rightfully so, has been on restructuring the government. The process I refer to as creative destruction. Now, I did not coin that term. That's actually an economic term put forth by Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter. It's the idea that the old technologies will be destroyed by new technologies, like the horse and buggy industry. When the automobile was introduced, it was a threat to the horse and buggy industry. And we could have passed laws protecting the horse and buggy industry and making automobiles illegal or just so terribly expensive they were impractical. If we had done that, we would have the world's best horse and buggy industry, but we would be a third world nation.
True.
So that's the price of progress, is this creative destruction where old, outdated technology and providers are, fade away, and the new create more opportunity, jobs, innovation, et cetera, et cetera. And that leads to higher standard of livings for everybody. That leads to progress. Jane, you don't count.
Oh, come on. Yes, she does.
Jane is in the middle of Amish territory. And so she still lives around a vibrant horse and buggy industry.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a unique sample. And Jane counts for a ton around here. She has actually been gracious and stepped in for E-Train a couple times, helped host, and we do love Jane. And she is right. Horse and buggy is still a thing.
It is.
But if cars had been pretty much outlawed or regulated so intensely that they were not feasible, this would be an entirely different country, would be an entirely different world. It's even that manufacturing ability to make cars that was in a large part because we were able to manufacture such high volumes of planes and tanks, other military vehicles, that we were just able to overwhelm enemy forces. Anyway, creative destruction. Melissa's reading ahead. For those of you who don't notice, money for nothing. And kind of, just talking about how the money is just wasted because the people in charge of it don't care. They get paid very good salaries, and as long as they keep the money flowing, they keep their salary. And that has been a huge, thing to overcome. The hammer to engage this process of creative destruction is DOGE, headed up by Elon Musk, everybody's favorite guy to beat up on right now. Now, we talked about this Tuesday some briefly. We hit some highlights of what was going on with DOGE and the discovery of basic spending projects, particularly at USAID. USAID, the United States Agency for International Development. It was established in 1961 by JFK. Its mission has been to kind of, influence friends and enemies around the world in the interest of the U.S., kind of generic mission. Has a budget of about $50 billion a year, which actually doubled during the Biden administration, which is interesting. It had been, relatively slow growing or stable, 15 to 20 million. Past 4 or 5 years, it's gotten pumped up to $50 billion and about 14,000 employees. Can't hear you, E-Train.
Is there a different slide for this?
No,
Okay.
still here. USA banging.
Okay, gotcha. Just making sure.
No, thank you. Well, this past week, out of that 14,000 employees, all of them were fired except for about 235. Now, I was trying to figure out what the average salary was, and salary.com estimates the salary at about 110,000 a person. So that just up front on the salary, that'll save $1.5 billion a year, not to mention their costs for housing, food, travel, the office, the benefits, which are about 30% of your salary normally. And in some embassies around the world, like Islamabad, USAID, it takes up half the embassy. So all of those people are being pulled home. They were supposed to, unless they had some sort of emergency, they were supposed to be back today, where they were basically going to be handed their pink slips. Now, like I say, USAID is still getting banged on. Just in the last few days, we've seen some additional interesting spending, I guess I could say, done in the name of influencing friends, right? We gave several million, $2.5 million to Vietnam to buy electrical vehicles, EVs.
Why?
How many Americans get the government to buy their EV or car?
They were trying. That was something that AOC wanted to do.
Yeah, they spent $2 million to fund sex change surgeries in Guatemala. We saw, receipts where USAID was paying millions to Hamas front organizations. USAID paid $40 million to Chinese bioweapons research lab. And it wasn't alone. The State Department threw in more, the Department of Defense threw in more, and NIH threw in more. I don't know what the total is, but we basically paid for Chinese bioweapons research. We've paid for support, food, and supplies for Al-Qaeda's fighters in Syria. Spent hundreds of millions of dollars to develop irrigation canals and fertilizer for poppy production in Afghanistan. Poppies, the precursor to heroin. And this, of course, the growth and the sale, distribution of that benefits the Taliban. Now, it's killing Americans, but, we subsidize it. We paid for it. We gave Egypt $6 million to support their tourism. They've got the frickin' pyramids. What the hell do they need us pumping their tourism up for? It also gave hundreds of millions of dollars to NGOs, non-government operations, who have a quote-unquote charitable purpose, like the Catholic Charities. Remember the bishop who got up in the cathedral and was ripping on Trump, talking about how she was so scared and terrified? Well, it turns out one of the NGOs she heads, and they have received $50 million the last couple of years to help funnel illegal immigrants from Central America into the U.S., teach them how to gain entry, teach them how to ask for asylum, which they get asylum. They are entitled to full Social Security benefits. They're entitled to SNAP payments, which is food stamps. They're entitled to Medicaid. The list just goes on. They were given a $10,000 Visa card, free travel anywhere in the country. It's not a bad gig, but paid for by you. Now, as I show in the bottom of this slide, in 15 days worth of work, DOGE has saved about $73 billion.
That's pretty good.
That's not bad. If they keep that up at that rate, they'll have more than $1 trillion this first year. And Elon thinks they can double that amount daily. Don't know for how long, but he thinks they can double or maybe triple it soon.
That's awesome.
So that's not bad. Now, DOGE has coordinated, just announced, yesterday, it coordinated among 33 different agencies to terminate 199 contracts, wasteful contracts, saving about $250 million. Now remember, DOGE, it's about a department of 60 or 70 people. And Elon brought in a handful of those that helped him go through Twitter and identify waste and look for areas to cut.
Waste, fraud, and abuse.
Waste, fraud, and abuse. So, like one of the contracts that was cut was, this is Asia, and this is the contract, Asia Pacific, Sri Lanka, Climate Change Mitigation, Adaptation, and Resilience Coordinator Service for Forest Service, workshop for intercultural communication, diversity, dialogue, circle communication across differences.
What does that mean?
I have no idea.
Okay.
But I'm kind of like thinking, that probably was funneled through some NGOs that are politically connected, NGOs headed up by a friend of the politicians who is collecting a $500,000 or $1 million a year salary to administer these monies.
Oh, administration.
So, when you talk about fraud, you can kind of get a hint or a glint of it. You may not be absolutely able to prove it. But, should a person run a supposedly charitable organization of 10 or 20 people handling $1 million, a few $1 million a year in grants, should he receive $1 million a year or $500,000 a year? Anyway.
It's kind of like executor, of an estate. I mean, they get 5% a year.
Yeah. But even then, that's because so much of the workload falls on them.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, and they have liability for it, et cetera, et cetera. This is a risk-free job, and all you are is a conduit for money, and you don't even have to supervise or provide receipts for the money. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but that's a big problem, and why, some people talk about, the Defense Department has failed audits. Well, the reason is all of these agencies are failing, quote unquote, the audit because there are no receipts. Today, the Department of Education, for example, terminated 3 DEI training grants totaling $15 million.
Nice.
$15 million in DEI grants.
Now that makes me think, where was this money actually going? If they wanted to disappear before Elon and his and Vivek and their teams get involved.
Why are so many people so mad it's being cut off?
Mm-hmm.
You want to know where it was going? Look who's getting the maddest. Look who's yelling the most. One of the institutions had previously hosted faculty workshops entitled Decolonizing the Curriculum.
What?
Now,
Okay.
NIH, National Institutes of Health.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that one of the agencies I said that was helping to fund Wuhan bioweapons research for
Mm-hmm.
communist China?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they announced that they've saved or were going to save $4 billion annually on excessive grant administration fees, which had been paid out at about 25% of all grants. And this is just gravy to universities. For example, if you're a researcher and you apply for a federal grant and you are awarded the grant, it could be $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, whatever. It could be 500,000, whatever. The university takes a percentage of that for quote unquote overhead because you're using the university's office, you're using your university computer, and if you're in the lab, you're using university laboratory equipment. Well, sometimes these fees can run up to 40%. I've seen it, my own school where some of them, if I remember correctly, were 40%, which is ridiculous. Absolutely, absolutely ridiculous. Because anyway, the
person
NIH,
doing the work, and because usually you have more than one person with these grants, these research grants,
they'll hire, quote unquote, hire graduate students. And pay them $15-$20 an hour. But that's included in the grant. And that doesn't come out of that administrative fee. It comes out of the remainder that the researcher receives from the grant. So the NIH today lowered the maximum expense to 15%. And at the rate of grants provided last year, that'll save about $4 billion. So that's a nice touch.
So that was just pure waste.
Yeah, this is still above what most foundations charge. So it really only impacts universities. And some universities have been charging up to 60% in administrative fees. So the researcher, when he applies for the grant, he just adds that in, and it makes the grant obviously bigger because he needs X amount for travel, for to pay salary, whatever. So in the last 2 days, we also saw where Health and Human Services, combined with DOGE, canceled 62 contracts worth $182 million.
For?
Solely for extraneous administrative cost. Not one touched a healthcare program. For example, there was a $168,000 contract for a Anthony Fauci museum exhibit.
Oh, hell to the no.
I thought you would like that one. The same guy that was just given a pardon going back to 2014 for the crimes he committed and who was secretly funding the Chinese bioweapons lab.
With your taxpayer money. Congratulations.
With your taxpayer money. I got to admit, that just chaps my ass. I'm sorry. Anyway, why are we funding enemies' research to be used against us? Somebody please explain that to me. I do not, in my heart of hearts, I do not understand that.
Your picture
we already talked about, and I showed you the USA spending site of the New York Times. In total of the last 4 years, the government paid New York Times about $10 million, paid Politico $8 million, Bloomberg $20 million, ABC got several million, USAID gave $3.3 million to the BBC, Reuters got $9 million. Are you getting the idea?
Yeah, that they were
Huge.
paying these news agencies to lie.
Have you ever seen the video where it starts off? You have like a local news station, and they start giving a report, and then another news station, pops up, and another, and everyone is saying the exact same words.
Mhm. Repetition.
Yeah, something is being programmed from above. It's not really independent local news coverage. They're being told exactly what to say, how to say it. We also saw the Social Security Administration yesterday removed a gender initiative marker from it. Like, you go into its website, there's a checkbox, where you indicate one of however many different genders. Well, they just removed that altogether, and the company that was administering that was charging them $1 million a year.
You're kidding.
No. So that saves $1 million a year. Now, this is just a sample of some of the ridiculousness where your money's been going. And I've seen some people comment that, $1 million out of a $2 trillion deficit is peanuts. And that just irritates the hell out of me, because for those people watching this show, $1 million to most everyone watching the show is huge money. Whatever part they contribute through their hard labors, through their taxes, shouldn't be wasted.
No.
We've got people working 2 or 3 jobs, and I value their time and their efforts, and whatever they pay to the government shouldn't be just absolutely wasted or paid in kickbacks or fraud. There ought to be
No.
great efforts to try to ensure that doesn't happen.
And then you think, I mean, what really gets me is people living paycheck to paycheck. And you've got Nancy Pelosi, who God knows she's getting kickbacks and or did, and also insider trading. And it's like, come on, it was so obvious, and
Yeah,
it's just like crapping, in the face of people who really do go to work hard, earn money, try to do the best they can, and some just they can't get ahead, and it's like that's not it ain't right.
and I know and understand that not everybody agrees with my perspective on certain issues, but in the viewers in the show, in the family, we've got liberals, we've got conservatives, we've got moderates, we've got gay, we've got straight, we've got bi, we've got people of all sorts of different varying opinions and perspectives and priorities. But nobody out of that group deserves to have any of their money wasted by government. And that's my point. The more you have to pay to government, the more it impacts your life and your future, lowering your standard of living.
Yeah, they're supposed to work for the American people, not get rich
Against
off the
them.
American people.
Yeah. Now, we've also seen significant changes in the markets, stock and bond market, over the past few weeks. Um, Bond yields, which, I follow the bond market more than the stock per se in terms of information about the economy. It is a more sophisticated, complex, quantitative market. And the bond yields have fallen over the past few weeks. It peaked, like the 10-year is a hugely important rate, 10-year Treasury. It peaked January 13th at 4.79%. It's currently 4.49, so it's fallen 30 basis points. Now, the significance of the 10-year is that it directly impacts mortgage rates, commercial loan rates. It is hugely important in establishing pricing for the loans that involve people and businesses.
So it's talking about the markets. I've noticed that everything is down except for the volatility index.
Yeah, which, when the market falls, volatility rises.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And that's kind of intuitive. If you look at graphs of the daily price changes in the market over time, you'll see that it generally rises slowly, but when it falls quickly. So normally if volatility is rising, risk is rising, stocks are falling.
Why is that going on right now?
Couple of things. One, the market has really risen over the past year. Two main reasons. One, AI. I mean, NVIDIA, Meta, the Magnificent Seven just have shot through the roof. Well, the bloom is off, particularly when DeepSeek came out. Doing what a version, 2 versions ago of Chat GPT was doing, far cheaper, using old technology, chips that were, 3 or 4 generations prior.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big shock to the AI community who had kind of, was getting fat and lazy. You only had, or they thought they only had a few competitors. And then DeepSeek comes out with this model, and it's just a wake up call to the industry. So that bloom's worn off. Secondly, inflation. Inflation is rising, which has caused the Fed to stop cutting rates. And the market was really, really hoping for more cuts. They love cheap money. They love free money. Like in the, from 2010 to 2017, 2016, the Fed had all of these QE programs, quantitative easing, and was pumping money into the markets, and stocks rose. It didn't matter what the economy did. Stocks were going up. You remember, Obama's last year, 6 months before the election, he was talking about the new normal being a 1 or 1.5% GDP growth, which is borderline stagnant.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, what does Trump have? A magic wand? It's just the new normal. You got to get used to it. It's what it is. So, but the market still went up 20 or 40, still was going up 20 to 40% a year.
Right.
And any growth it was in government jobs or health and education, which is paid for by government. The private sector has been struggling for a while. So anyway.
So why is, I noticed that Bitcoin took a dive too.
Yeah. Bitcoin, you'll see Bitcoin dive initially when markets dive because a couple things. One, there's a lot of Bitcoin leveraging, some of these leveraged Bitcoin funds. And when they, see the market starting to drop, they dump quickly. Two, Bitcoin is used kind of for liquidity.
Mm-hmm.
And as some of these margin investors receive calls for more cash, they dump Bitcoin to raise the cash. They can't sell the stocks or don't want to sell their stock positions because they're in a negative position and they think it's going to come back. So they'll use Bitcoin to try to meet the margin call.
Gotcha.
But Bitcoin hasn't fallen like it did 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago when bad news hit. It fell from 101 to 91 in a day. By 2 days later, it was back to 101. So there's still a ton of money flowing into Bitcoin. And that looks like has a good chance of increasing. We'll talk about that in a minute. So, and I think, I was talking about bonds. When bond prices rise, yields fall. And so the yields are falling in bonds. Some of the people in stocks are moving out into bonds. They're feeling safer about bonds because I think the reason is they think inflation will slow. And this due to the cuts we're seeing in government spending. I think they're finally coming to believe or see that Trump is going to do what he said he's going to do. He's going to try to cut the size and growth of government. And if that happens, that will ease some of the massive inflationary pressures we've been under for 5, 6, 7 years. So bond prices are rising. You're seeing money shifting into bonds and out of stocks.
Okay.
Now, Elon, Mr. Musk, has estimated from his brief experience with DOGE, which,
Mhm.
let's face it, it runs 15 days. He has estimated from his experience in examining government books that about 10% of the budget might be fraud.
Damn.
Not just wasteful, we're talking about fraud. Basically, payoffs to political cronies. And that's, after only 2 weeks' work, his estimate might be low.
Listen, have these people been pardoned? Like, is there a way to hold
I mean,
people
some of them
accountable?
have, but not all of them have. And
Okay.
even if they've been pardoned,
Hmm.
they can still be brought in to testify, and they can no longer use the Fifth Amendment because that only protects them from incriminating themselves. Well, they've been pardoned. They can't incriminate themselves.
So at
So
least we'll
they
know the
can't
truth.
plead the Fifth. They have to answer truthfully. If they don't, they could be charged with perjury.
Okay.
So I wouldn't be surprised to see some investigate once all the DOGE stuff calms down and they get in a rhythm with, operating hopefully a more efficient, leaner government, then you'll probably see some of these other investigations start up and come to the forefront. Now, I said Elon's estimate might be low.
Hmm.
If he's right, that's about 700 billion to $1 trillion just in fraud, absolute waste. And that doesn't even include getting rid of non-essential programs that the federal government shouldn't be in or does poorly. There's a good chance Department of Education will be severely cut. When the Department of Education was started, we were number one in the world in education. We've since fallen out of the top 25.
Does that mean that if you administer education, it becomes poor?
It means, the priorities have switched from educating kids to administering education because there's been so much money thrown at it.
Yeah.
And we by far lead the world in what we pay for education. Japan, Finland, Eastern European countries, Denmark, Norway, they all have better performing kids and spend far less than we do.
Sorry, I'm having a little Vince issue. He's trying to climb on my keyboard.
Now, note, and I referred to this a little earlier, note the absolute anger at this fraud being revealed and reduced. To me, that's just simply amazing. Simply amazing.
It's insane. I mean, Schumer's about to lose his mind.
Schumer, Maxine Waters. I mean,
Hmm.
there's a whole litany of them.
How can they take our bottle fed money from us?
And I was thinking, I'm shocked, but I shouldn't be because I'm fairly aware of the growth in the bureaucracy over the past 30 years. And, when I started thinking about that's the real key is, like I mentioned earlier, you've got little, fiefdoms that have been established, little kingdoms being
Mhm.
ruled by these different groups, individuals, or alliances. And they've done it without interference from anybody up from above. The money has just kept flowing to them, and it's just kept increasing with no questions, no demands for accountability, nothing. And now their riches all of a sudden are being cut off, not reduced, cut off. And they're losing their jobs, they're losing their wealth and their power that attends the flow of that money.
It's kind of like, sorry, a wealthy family who is taking care of their children beyond what is required, expected, needed, desired. I mean, not desired. Everybody wants that, but and then mom and dad go, okay, you're on your own. You're cut off, and
Yep.
child throws a complete and utter tantrum. It's not fair, you know. Just
Didn't see
you
it
have money.
coming,
I
doesn't
should have the
expect it.
money. Do what?
Didn't expect it, didn't see it coming, hadn't been trained for it.
Right,
Just
and that's
expected the
kind of
gravy train to continue ad infinitum.
and that's what I'm seeing in the government right now. It's like,
Yep.
no, it's not fair. Where's my money?
That's, that sums it up pretty well. So to me, um, I mentioned Dodge is only about 70 people, but these folks are sleeping in their offices. Many of them are unpaid. They're doing it simply because they have a once in a lifetime opportunity to restore the balance of power back to the people by slashing the bureaucracy and the waste.
Listen, if I could sleep in that place and find out all the secrets about who's spending money where, I would do it for free. Hell yeah.
Yeah. I well anyway, I story for another day.
Okay.
But
Sorry.
well, this is not the first time this has happened. This, efficiency review, auditing the executive branch, whatever, putting together a team and, trying to cut spending. It actually happened, for example, in 1941. The Truman Committee was formed to review the Department of Defense. With the
Hmm.
increase in defense spending, a bipartisan council was formed in March of 41 with the goal of trying to find and correct wasteful spending in the Department of Defense. The Truman Committee actually proved to be one of the more successful investigative efforts ever mounted by the U.S. government. Had an initial, this will make you laugh, had an initial budget of about $15,000. And it expanded its efforts over 3 years to about $360,000 in cost. But it saved an estimated $20 billion in military spending. And by improving resource allocation and efficiency, it saved thousands of lives of U.S. servicemen who benefited from greater availability of equipment and the right kind of equipment instead of just paying for equipment that was being built in the right district. Excuse me.
What do you think is going to, speaking of like defense and budgets, since the Pentagon has never passed an audit ever, and they're always like, millions, if not billions of dollars off, what do you think is going to happen? Or when DOGE gets in there and they figure out where the money went?
Oh, well, they won't.
They won't?
No.
Why not?
And I will answer why in a minute.
Okay.
Headed that way.
Okay. Sorry.
No, you're good. The interesting thing to me about the Truman Committee, Democrats and Republicans, and I think many of you will find this hard to believe, but every committee report was unanimous in approval.
Hmm.
Can you imagine an era when Democrats and Republicans actually tried to work together for the good of the country?
I can, but if you're just getting into politics in the past few years, it seems unconscionable, unfathomable.
Yeah.
It's just not possible. But
Yeah. Today, I can't imagine the scenario where that would happen.
no,
The,
nope.
and that's only one department. They're just looking at defense. But the thing that's, different that different from the usual way of doing business, not from the Truman Committee, but the thing that DOGE is doing different is it goes into each department with a mindset of a zero-based budget.
What does that
Now,
mean?
this is how corporations budget their money. They look at the departments to justify their request for funds
Hmm.
rather than take last year's budget and just say we need a 5% increase. So every department has to justify its expenses for the upcoming year. So they start off with zero and say, how much do we need and why? So it's the way government has worked for decades has been you just take whatever they got last year and just, increase it.
By the
Congress
no,
in the budget.
no, the rate. The is it like the consumer price
It's
index
not
that they do it,
it's
or is
not
it
always
tied to
tied,
anything,
not
or is it
always
just
tied to CPI.
okay? That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah. There has been zero incentive for government or government officials to try to save or cut expenses. There is no reward. In fact, there's sometimes only penalties. Their responsibilities are diminished. They aren't given new ones. They aren't rewarded. They aren't promoted because they cut or work to cut the amount of money that department or agency receives.
Now here's a problem I have with some of this spending. Like they increase it, but then if the department or the entity or whatever doesn't spend all of it, then they don't get their raise for the next year. It's kind of like a
No,
race to spend everything.
well, if they don't spend it, their budget is cut the next year
Right. Hmm.
because the way the government budgets, it takes what they spent the previous year and then will increase it by whatever rate. So if they don't spend all that money, that amount is lowered. So the department is automatically cut for the next year as well. Like I say,
But
they
that
are
rarely
penalized.
happens.
Yeah, they are penalized if they try to save. It's just an arbitrary and capricious, budgeting allocation system. But that's what we have used for decades. And that's how we've gotten in the mess we're in.
All right, it's tinkle time. Hang on. I'll be right back.
TMI, but thank you. Anyway, the corruption. Nobody's been arrested yet. May not happen. As I kind of alluded to earlier, it's hard to prove absolute fraud. But how does it work? Basically the Cliff Notes version. Congress allocates money to these departments or agencies. Very little of that money allocated is specified, and the payment process is never identified. So each department is given this chunk of money, like USAID was given $50 billion last year. They have leeway on how they spend it. So their employees simply decide, I want to spend it on this program, on this item. So they type up a voucher and send it to Treasury to be paid. The Treasury payment officers were directed not to refuse any voucher, even if it was going to a known fraudulent company or terrorist group. They had to pay everything. So payments oftentimes are made to politically connected firms. And what makes them politically connected? Well, you just follow the money. If USAID gives a NGO millions of dollars, well, this NGO might help register voters, but it works primarily in Democratic districts. Or the individual heading the NGO or whatever company that receives the grant to administer is a close political friend, contributor. And so they may contribute, make a sizable campaign donation and then receive tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars in money to, quote unquote, administer, to oversee. And of course, they take their fees, their charges. Now, Ellen, earlier asked about auditing like Department of Defense. Why can they not pass an audit? Same reason most any agency can't pass an audit, because there is no, in the federal government, most of these agencies have no reconciliation of the books to ensure that the money was dispersed to its stated end. It just disappears, or to be spent at the discretion of the recipient agent or individual or group. A USAID employee may have to travel to the country to, quote unquote, oversee the disbursement. So they get to travel to, various and sundry places. All their expenses are paid. They're still collecting 100% of salary for however long they're over there. Think about the number of USAID workers that were overseas. 10,000, I forget the exact number. But that's a ton of people to administer charitable contributions. So they get an all-expense paid trip to various countries, and I'm willing to bet they pretty much were not concerned with saving money as they traveled or lived over there. But we'll never know, because for a lot of the details, there's no system of checks or reconciliation. There's no receipts presented. The money is just spent. And sometimes I kind of understand. In Afghanistan, for example, the military kept tons of cash to pay the warlords and allies and informants and whatever. They paid them in cash. There's no real banking system over there. Some estimates now, since the Taliban took over, I heard of them reports of them finding houses filled with cash. Have no idea the total amount of money, cash left behind. Some estimates say $1 billion. In addition to the $7 billion in military equipment we abandoned. But when an officer makes a payment to to an informant or a warlord, there's no receipt there. So there's no real proof that money was dispersed for its intended purpose. In war, it's just sometimes hard to get receipts. And, I understand that. You can't get receipts for everything, but let's face it, we can do far better. We can do far better. Now, I still hear people say, things like Musk was unelected. He doesn't have security clearance. DOGE is unconstitutional. And to that, I just got to ask, are the employees at Health and Human Services or the IRS or the Treasury, are they elected? Do they have security clearances? Will they access data with your personal information?
Wait. Hang on. I got to get you to back up a minute. Why can't you get receipts for everything?
Because the example I used was like the Department of Defense in Afghanistan would have tons of cash available because they would oftentimes pay informants or warlords, tribal warlords, for help or information. and they
But
would
you could
pay
at
them
least
in cash
write it down.
because there's no banking system.
They could write it down. This much went to this person.
Yeah, but that's when you are a lieutenant and you're handing over $5,000 and you're outside of base or whatever, you're not carrying a receipt book with you. You're
No, but
traveling
it's at
lean
least
and light. I,
accountability. I don't
I'm just saying that I can understand not always having receipts for everything in a time of war. Some
Well, yeah,
formalities just get thrown out the window and people are shooting at you.
I get
But
it.
we can do better. And if some of the reports are correct about having houses, filled with cash that we just abandon, we can do better.
Yeah.
So does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's justifiable or a good excuse. We can do better, but
And
that's
we
one
should.
reason. And Department of Defense is not unusual, is not unique in not having receipts for everything. Like I say, there's no reconciliation process in government accounting for a
And they're
lot
talking
of
like
the
billions of dollars,
trillions of dollars.
trillions. Sorry.
Yeah.
That to me, I mean, a billion or two, okay, but trillions, no.
Yeah, that's why they are targeting some of the programs and saying, this program, we don't need to pay for diversity scholarships in Burma. We don't need to
Right.
give money to Wuhan Bioweapons Lab.
Right.
They can't track down exactly what happened to the disbursement of the previous funds in prior years because there's no receipts. But they can stop future expenses. So this is not really an audit, as I've heard some people describe it.
Mm-hmm.
It is a review of proposed expenses, which is subtly different. So anyway, the basic point is that the current employees of all these different departments that have access to personal information, they weren't elected. They don't have security clearance because it's not classified information. It's not top secret. And the people with DOGE are government employees. They have had the background checks. And there's, history is pretty clear. This kind of efficiency review has been done before.
And the fact that they act like the government isn't run by the people. It is. I think any person off the street should be able to go in and look at where the money's being spent and where the waste is, where the abuse is, where the fraud is, and hold them accountable.
It's funny. Nobody, these people aren't arguing that their whimsical, discretionary allocation of taxpayer money is not they're arguing that it's not unconstitutional. They're arguing that discovering it and trying to stop it is unconstitutional.
And no,
That's just, yeah,
that's
that's just,
asinine.
that's a good word.
Thank you. I have no
So
then.
nobody in these departments has security clearances. None of them were elected. It's not unconstitutional. These are our executive departments. They all report to the president. He is the chief executive officer and charged with handling the day-to-day operations of government, making it more efficient. The USDS Digital Services is an example. When Obama established it, nobody was arguing it's unconstitutional. All Trump's doing is taking that department and having it do what it's supposed to do. Both Truman, Clinton did similar. Nobody was arguing it was unconstitutional at that time. So the battles are ongoing in the courts. A federal judge appointed by the younger Bush refused to block DOGE from accessing Labor Department records on the basis that the plaintiffs lacked standing and suffered no injury. However, earlier today, an Obama appointed judge blocked DOGE from accessing Treasury records.
That's interesting.
He blocked the Treasury Department from providing access to anyone other than civil servants with a need to access to perform their job duties. It explicitly prohibits special government employees and those detailed from outside the department. So basically, he made the Treasury payroll system audit proof. It cannot be audited.
That's not right.
That's not right. I don't think that's going to hold up. But I was sitting there thinking,
My question is, what are they hiding?
yeah, I think there's a relatively simple workaround. You simply take, a few of the DOGE employees and transfer them to the Treasury Department, swear them in as a civil servant, and assign them to that particular department. And then they have need to do their job to access the records. It's just kind of idiocy. But, that's what the judge ruled. That ruling will only last until Friday, when another judge is hearing a larger case brought by 19 Democratic state attorney generals.
Oh, that should be fun.
And the judge, let's face it, he granted the rule not on the basis of any limits on presidential authority, but his reasoning was there's a risk of disclosure of confidential information and heightened risk of hacking. All right, all the DOGE employees have signed confidentiality agreements, same as any other Treasury employee.
Right.
Secondly, they have read-only access to the output. They don't have any access to the code. So they're not involved in the coding or operation. They are just looking at the expenses, the categories of expenses. So neither of those arguments, to me, holds water. The auditors are federal employees. They have background checks. They've signed confidentiality agreements, and they have read-only access to the data, not the code or the programs themselves. So, in actuality, working for the Department of Digital Services, their job actually would entitle them to examine the code and the computers that run the code. That's what that office was created for, to try to improve efficiency in digital services. So one other interesting thing about the order, it was issued ex parte, meaning Trump's lawyers were not, or the government lawyers were not warned and could not weigh in. Only the Democrat attorney general's arguments were heard or considered. So, let's face it, there's some strong opposition to DOGE. You've got former USA Director Samantha Powers being one of them. She's an interesting character. Her financial disclosures in 2021 show a net worth of about $6 million.
Nice.
6 to 12 million. Her last form showed a net worth of about 30 million. Excuse me.
Really?
And this on a salary of $180,000 a year.
That's amazing.
That's a skill right there.
That is a Pelosi worthy skill.
I'm getting the hiccup. Sorry about that. Now, something else I saw was a GAO report that was in Forbes last year. And according to the GAO, which the GAO is the Government Accounting Office, they're the ones who handle the quote-unquote audits for the federal government. It's a federal agency. They do audits, or did until the judge ruled an outside agency couldn't do audits of the Treasury anymore. So according to the GAO, they examined the different, and I don't know how they did. I didn't get into the details. But they examined the different departments in the executive branch. And according to them, their analysis, the Department of Treasury has the greatest percentage of waste, fraud, and abuse at about 23.87%.
Sorry.
23.87% of the department's budget. So nearly 24% of Treasury expenses are the GAO would classify as waste, fraud, or abuse. And nothing was done to reduce or change that. This is followed by the Labor Department at 11.6, the VA at 10.33, Agriculture at 9.7, and Health and Human Services at 8.87. According to the GAO, the waste was less in defense, small business, damn it,
Sorry.
It's kind of hard to talk when you've got the hiccups and you can't.
Look at your phone. I sent you a text. That'll get them out of you.
Is that your dinner for the night?
Mm-hmm.
Apparently one of her traps caught a mouse.
I live in the middle of nowhere, literally nowhere. I mean, it's 20 minutes to a gas station, and like more than 45 to a grocery store. So like I'm in the middle of nowhere, and so this house has sat for quite a few, if not months, almost a year, and so we've had there are a couple of mice. And so I got one. I'm pretty happy.
Congratulations.
Actually, that's the second one I've gotten. But obviously, Vince is useless.
Yeah, she first. Yeah, we noticed that.
Mm-hmm.
She set out a trap the other day, and apparently it sprung. So the mice was kind of, got away or smart. But apparently they've. It's working a little bit better now.
And y'all don't be mad because I don't mind mice. I mind them in my pantry. That's a problem.
Now, this post, I saw it just before we came on the air, and I thought it was interesting, so I'm throwing it up. To be clear, what DOGE and Treasury agreed to, this is before the judge's ruling, is the following. 1, require that all outgoing government payments have a payment code, which is necessary in order to pass financial audits. This has frequently left blank, making audits almost impossible. Not a bad thing. 2, all payments must also include a rationale for the payments in the comment field, which is currently left blank. Importantly, we are not yet applying any judgment to this rationale, but simply requiring that some attempt be made to explain the payment, more than nothing.
Yeah, that's 3, what I was saying before. Yeah.
3, the do not pay list of entities known to be fraudulent or people who are dead or probable fronts for terrorist organizations or do not match congressional appropriations must be actually implemented and not ignored. Remember I told you how the Treasury for the past years said pay every voucher? Doesn't matter if you know it's a fraud. Doesn't matter if you know it's a terrorist organization. Pay it. All of them are paid. There was no rejection. There was no refusal. There was no oversight. So it can currently take up to a year to get on this list, which is far too long. The list should be updated at least weekly, if not daily. Good point.
Sounds like our voter registration list. And Melissa, teach them how to make ratatouille. Duh. I will make you tiny chef hats. They would have to be these are like, they're almost like little robo-mouse. They're like this big. They're tiny.
Well, Elon goes on, and he talks about the above are super obvious. Necessary changes are being implemented by existing long-time career government employees, not anyone from DOGE. It is ridiculous these changes didn't exist already. Yesterday, I was told that there are currently over $100 billion a year of entitlement payments to individuals with no social security number or even a temporary ID number. $100 billion
Yeah.
a year to individuals with no social security number. When I asked if anyone at Treasury had a rough guess on what percentage of that number is unequivocal and obvious fraud, the consensus in the room was about half. So 50 billion a year or $1 billion a week.
God knows.
Interesting, interesting information. So, in short, the resistance continues. And if you want to keep up to date on X, I don't know how many of y'all are on X or not, but there is.
News.
Why the hell does that keep popping up?
I don't know. I follow DOGE on X.
Yeah, you can Department of Government Efficiency, and so the DOGE is more transparent than Kanye's wife at the Grammys.
Yeah.
They will detail everything. Anybody have any questions other than for Ratatouille?
Ratatouille. Calliope.
Calliope? You mean Calliope?
Calliope. There she is. She's
There
baby.
she is. The grand introduction to the family of E
Calliope.
Train's
Yeah.
newest member of the family, bestie. I
Yeah.
don't.
I don't know. I have got to make her an offense enclosure. But here she is. Like that's a 5 gallon bucket, so you can imagine how small she is that she's beside. Yeah, when
So
when I first met her and she put her little paws up, they barely like got over my knee. She's tiny. She's baby.
well, she's
I
cute.
love her. She is the cutest.
She's cute. You're gonna have to get her some company. I don't know what,
Okay, so
but some
yes,
company.
she's a sweet baby. We have got I because we have I have got Chuck and Taloo, and then I've got Aspen now and Vince, who's useless, obviously, and then Mahoney is coming. What next week?
Yeah.
And then I'm keeping a friend's dog for a few weeks in July. So that's going to be one, two, three, 4 dogs, 2 cats, and a goat.
Well, you have to be careful with the dogs around Calliope. Some of them might not treat her too gently.
Ah, you mean the one?
Yeah, or I don't know what the other one you're keeping either
Tiny,
is, but
tiny,
okay.
like
Yeah.
like the little ones. Well, yeah, she's gonna. Duh. Look how
We'll see
cute
how
she
long
is.
that lasts.
Look how cute she is.
Yeah, if you start that, you'll never be able to get her to sleep outside at night.
Oh yes, I will. No, like I know she looks big, but like when I held her, she was like just right here in my arms. That's it. That's how big she is. She's tiny.
She's going to get about 4 times that size.
That's okay. She's precious. She can sleep wherever she wants to. I will make her a condominium. I can too, right? Look how cute she is. Who wouldn't
Well,
want
good
her as a
luck.
house? And she's precious. She's baby.
She's a goat.
But look at her.
She
I mean, come
needs,
on. Who wouldn't love that little goat?
well, you need it, she'll need some grazing.
I know.
You don't want to
I'll
feed
grow
her
her some grass.
just grains.
I mean, there's three
And
and a quarter acres.
be careful with
She's,
the coyotes.
I haven't seen one yet or heard of one. And there's this funny little rat pack that runs around the area here. I don't know who owns them, but it's like one big dog and like six little dogs, and the little dogs follow the big dog around everywhere. Maybe they're strays. I don't know, but it is the funniest thing I've ever seen.
That may be a threat too.
No, but no, they're really sweet. they're just they're just funny. They just kind of
Yeah.
all run around together.
I'm just saying, if they're wild or pseudo wild, goats are prey animals.
I'm not
So
gonna let anything happen to that baby. Don't you worry.
just be careful. Yeah, I don't want to get that phone call.
You're not gonna get that crying phone call, Clay. No, don't worry.
I don't
She'll
want
be well protected.
I want both of y'all happy.
Mm-hmm. Vince, who's sitting here beside me looking like I'm crazy, will protect. No, no, she won't. Um, no, you
No,
won't,
you won't.
really. Yeah, you're useless. Anyhow, to get an Irish wolfhound to take care of Calliope. I know, right? Hmm.
Actually, you would be better with like a Great Pyrenees, a couple of them.
Why?
Irish wolfhounds are sight animals.
Well, what
If they
about
see something, they will
mastiffs?
pursue it you to the ends of the earth. You may not see them for days.
What about mastiffs?
Mastiffs aren't
They're guard dogs.
yeah, but they aren't sight animals. They won't just take off and keep running till they catch
No,
whatever the prey
that's what
is.
I'm saying. But they'll guard.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Maybe this is not your forte, but Minnesota Tim Waltz says he's going
I
against the
know.
trans athlete ban in school sports. My understanding is the federal government will then withhold money from the
Hang
school
on.
system.
From
How will that affect Minnesota taxpayers? Are we going to have to pay higher state taxes because of this? Um, the Trump, what will
hey,
happen, and
Clay,
it'll be contested in the courts.
your mic is not picking up.
Oh, sorry. What will happen, and it will be contested in the courts, is the president will cut off funding for the school or schools involved. If that school receives, say, an average of $7,000 per student, they will cut that district's budget that it receives in federal money by that amount. And so the first course will be for the state to sue the federal government and say, that's wrong, and try to win in the courts. And if that doesn't happen, their choice will be either increase the state taxes to make up the shortfall or abandon the policy and let girls' sports be for girls, men's sports for men. So it'll take some years for it to all work out. But if the court rules that the government can withhold the funds because of the violation of Title IX and not protecting women's sports, which I would think would be more likely than not,
Mm-hmm.
then I would expect Minnesota to abandon that policy. So I think the chances are slim that it affects Minnesota taxpayers, but there's a whole lot of if and wonderment surrounding that answer. Hope that
And
helps, but that's my best guess.
Tim is the, forgive me for not knowing what position he holds in Minnesota. Help me out, Clay.
Governor,
Okay, well,
governor.
when's his election coming up? Because I'm pretty sure if your taxes go up, he's gone.
Yeah, he's got, I think, 2 more years, if I remember.
Okay.
And so we'll see.
Clay has a partial wolfhound.
He was a whole wolfhound.
Well, Partial ownership checkouts. He's up in
Yeah,
2026, so next year.
I re-
Okay.
I rescued him and put him with a guy I actually work with, and still stayed in touch, get to see him and everything, and then just found out a month ago that he's got big tumors, and so his
Oh
his
no.
time is short. Yeah, there's nothing they can do. So it looks like Melissa and Steph know each other. So
We'll see.
uh,
She appreciates your
good,
insight. Thanks,
good to see.
Steph.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Steph. Appreciate you asking the question. If you have any others, throw them out. Don't know that I can answer them, but I'll be glad
We'll
to
answer
give it a
on
shot.
Tuesday night. We'll answer on Tuesday night if we can't get it tonight.
Yeah, I can usually track down most things, and then
Mhm.
if it's not in my comfort zone to answer, I will be honest about what it is and why.
No, just saying hi.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Well, cool. Very cool. Well, glad to have y'all.
yeah. Thanks for popping on.
So, Calliope. I've still got to learn
Yes.
how to say that consistently. Calliope.
Hmm.
A
She's a
goat.
calico calliope goat. Hmm.
We now have a goat in the family.
Hmm. But she's precious.
Yep. Can't wait till she's actually on live. And I think that will happen sooner than later. Somehow, I just think that will happen.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
So, y'all stay tuned.
It'll be the MOM goat show.
Now, I also saw some, Trump announced late this week that he was going to introduce some reciprocal tariffs, probably on Europe, maybe on China. I'm not sure. Um, Countries weren't specified, but he'll do it next week. And that's one reason why the market fell, because it's finally coming to the conclusion there will be some tariffs, and that the Fed is not going to cut. So tariffs are still a big issue. And we've talked about the impact of tariffs in the past, as to show how they actually have worked, versus, some theoretical construct, or, some people go all the way back to Smoot-Hawley, and their history's a little rough. I'm not going to go into all the details. I can, sometime, but their history's a little rough if they're using Smoot-Hawley for an example. Well, I saw, Peter Druckenmiller weighed in on this topic. And y'all know I have a huge respect for this guy. He has, for the past 30 years, averaged, 30 or 40% a year on his portfolio. No down years in nearly 30 years. Hell of an investor. Good guy. So he had some comments on the tariffs, and I thought they were apropos. So I am going to actually, before
Sorry.
StreamYard screws me, I'm going to restart it.
Uh-oh. You can't restart StreamYard. Okay, we're
No, I mean
good.
the screen share.
Gotcha.
If I We use StreamYard to stream it to YouTube, Rumble, and X. So if I click off of the screen and then go back to it, load something else in it, sometimes the sound won't come across when I'm playing a video. So I've just gotten in the habit, until StreamYard finds the issue, of restarting it. So here's Peter Druckenmiller on tariffs.
I can't hear anything. Clay, no sound.
Should be.
I can't hear it. Anybody else?
Try it again.
In a perfect world, I would not 10% tariff, but we're not in a perfect world. We have a big fiscal problem, mandatory spending, plus interest expense is literally 100% of revenues. Because of that, we need pay-fors. So our main choices are an income tax and a consumption tax like tariff. To me, tariff is simply a consumption tax that foreigners pay for some of it. Now, the risk is retaliation, but as long as we stay in the 10% range, the risks are overblown relative to the rewards.
So, like I say, I've got a lot of respect for the guy. His track record is just damned impressive. But, he makes a good point. Maybe DOGE cut the sound funding. I wouldn't be surprised StreamYard's on the federal dole.
That was good, Melissa.
And that's why we love Melissa. She does a good job of keeping us on our toes. What most, like when Trump put tariffs in 2017 during his first term, 2018, we had lower inflation than when he took office. And the thing about the tariffs is a lot of the countries that we're putting tariffs in, one, the tariffs aren't designed necessarily to be permanent. They're designed to try to get a change in policy. Like China would tariff American goods imported in, and they would demand intellectual property. They demand the manufacturing process. They demand the blueprints, the whole thing. And so that's how they learn to manufacture a lot of things that have since put American manufacturers out of business or greatly hurt American manufacturers. So Trump uses tariffs as a big stick to try to force a change in policy to let Americans compete on a level playing field. So, and that's what these tariffs are for. They're reciprocal. Countries are, putting tariffs on American products, and he wants the Americans to be able to play in a level playing field. Now, that's different from the tariffs he's talked about implementing to replace the income tax. If those would be more permanent.
Sorry, that's just taking over my keyboard.
But that's a different ball game than what we're talking about now. He's going to announce some reciprocal tariffs. If they change their policy, just like Canada did, Mexico did, the tariffs vaporize or are reduced. So these are just negotiating positions that he's establishing. And, we can talk about the tariffs as a replacement for income tax. I mentioned it a little bit Tuesday night, but Cliff Notes version, we import 13% of GDP. So I'm going to assume 13% of what you buy is imported. Well, a 25% tariff would increase the inflation rate by a couple of percent, 2.5%.
Just a hell of a lot better than 20 to 30% of your income.
Yeah. The flip side is, income taxes on average take, say for a middle class or upper middle class, 15 to 20% of your income. Just income taxes. That doesn't include Social Security or whatever. Just income taxes. Well, that would go to zero or be greatly reduced. So the idea is you would have, let's say conservatively, 12 to 15% more income every month, and you'd pay 2% more on average for your goods.
If you choose to purchase those goods from other countries.
Yeah. And, there would be substitutes. Some of the companies, like several Canadian companies, have announced they're moving manufacturing or plants to the U.S. So the products they produce in the U.S. won't be tariffed. Mm-hmm. So, I like the trade-offs in that scenario too. I think it would be ultimately very beneficial in the long run, but only if we get the income tax cuts. Just putting tariffs on by themselves, no, hell no. But anyway, that's where most people, when they say tariffs are inflationary or bad for the economy, et cetera, kind of miss the boat. They're not looking at the whole picture, what also is happening.
And it's not permanent.
Yeah. Well, if he replaces the income tax, those would be permanent.
Right. Yeah. But right now it's not.
Right now they're not. And, China ate the cost of the tariffs, in 2017, 2018. They devalued their currency. Mm-hmm. And so the net price change to the American consumer was virtually zero.
And on top of that, inflation, they also subsidized the shipping.
Yeah. That's why inflation dropped. And China really ate the cost of the tariffs. Also, their economy is in far worse shape than it was in 2018. They can far less afford to lose that trade, to lose that business. They need to be able to export to the U.S. So I think that increases the likelihood that they would once again devalue their currency. It's not a given.
Fair enough.
Their egos, once you get, powerful men's egos involved, you're never really sure what the result is. It's not always the rational one. But China can't afford to lose business right now. Their economy is just getting screwed.
It's crap.
In a perfect world.
Yep.
Sorry about that. Next on the agenda is lower gas prices are coming your way. Now, anytime I talk about lower gas prices, I always go back to the 70s. 32 cents a gallon. How cool would that be? Okay, they're not getting that low, but since the inauguration, you can see here on this chart, the inauguration was about where oil prices peaked. Since that time, there have been a steady decline, going from roughly $80 a barrel down to $71.
What time period is this?
2 weeks.
This graph is 2 weeks?
Yeah. From the peak to here.
Nice.
So oil prices have fallen pretty much in a straight line, and are down 10%, over 10% from their high. This drop alone, if it doesn't drop any further, will reduce inflation by about 20 basis points, or 0.2%. That's significant.
Doesn't sound like much, but it's big.
Yeah. And that's if it doesn't drop any further. So the energy markets are telling us something. This is information. So what are the energy markets telling us? One, it's pointing out that the global market is weak. Did I mention that China's economy is dying?
Yes.
Have I mentioned that Europe's economy sucks?
Yes.
The U.S. economy isn't so hot. The Russia-Ukrainian war is nearing its end. At that point, Russia will be able to increase oil exports. Ukraine will be able to increase oil exports. The U.S. is changing course and is going to be increasing its oil exports. Natural gas exports. In fact, Trump just signed an agreement with Japan, or came to terms with Japan, and he stated that Japan will soon begin importing historic new shipments of clean American liquefied natural gas in record numbers. We were talking about the pipeline in Alaska, which is the closest point of major oil and gas to Japan by far. We're talking about a joint venture of some type between Japan and us, having to do with Alaskan oil and gas.
I love it.
Some of the areas that the previous administration declared out of bounds for drilling. You have to realize American oil, past 4 years, CapEx has dropped to near zero. invested in America with all the restrictions, the additional fees, the tariffs, the lands being taken out of circulation. No new wells have really been drilled. In fact, the number of wells producing rigs has fallen every month for the last year and a half. Production increased the first part of the, first couple of years of the administration because so many wells were approved during Trump's last few months and Biden's first few months before he stopped all applications, that those wells came online and started producing. Of course, new wells, are peak producers. So yes, production has gone up, but if you look over the past year, production has seemed to peak. And as more and more wells go offline or are shut down because they're not producing enough, that's going to start falling. So I expect oil production to actually drop for a little while because it'll take a year and a half to get permitted, to get approvals, and then to get the equipment, set it up, start drilling, and turn it into a producing well. But the oil industry is kind of changing its view that supply is going to be increasing over the next few years, and demand probably isn't going to boom. So I wouldn't be shocked to see oil prices continue to decline some. Irregularly, it won't be a smooth linear trend, but I wouldn't be surprised in 2 years if oil is not cheaper than it is today. Next thing on the list, one of our favorite topics, Bitcoin or crypto, and states. People, we've talked about how Trump is eyeing a crypto reserve. Well, states also are now eyeing Bitcoin reserves for their own purposes, for their own states. 16 of them are actually actively moving toward developing crypto reserves. Utah is the closest, followed by New Mexico, Arizona, Wyoming, Massachusetts, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas. The Utah's bill has a bill that's about to be approved. It will authorize the Treasury to allocate up to 5% of public funds, think retirement account money, into qualified digital assets. The main requirement is they have to have a market cap in excess of $500 billion, averaged over the last 12 months. Well, only Bitcoin fills that bill. So if Utah takes 5% of its retirement accounts and starts buying Bitcoin, and then if New Mexico, Arizona, Wyoming, these other states do the same, if the federal government starts doing the same, then I dare say I anticipate the price of Bitcoin going up over the next little while. Now, again, this is going to be a process over the next year, 2 years, whatever. And Bitcoin is still going to bounce. It's still going to have that volatility. But if you're looking for something, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, this probably would not be the worst thing you could invest in. That is not investment advice. I am not recommending investment advice. I'm just giving you, my opinions, how I view it. If you have specific questions, reservations, whatever, I'll be glad to share with you my thoughts, but I'm no longer a registered investment advisor. I don't manage portfolios anymore and am not making any specific recommendation. Do we all get Bitcoin in our MOM stockings this year? If we're really good. If you're really, really good.
Vince disagrees. He just went, raw. But if you also have a question for Clay, he's almanacked. You can look him up on there if you have a personal question or a more nuanced question.
Yeah, was out. Went to a Edgar Allan Poe speakeasy theater presentation last night, and was talking with a friend, and they had put $17 into a crypto account. Didn't even know which crypto they bought.
When?
Just a couple weeks ago. And but Melissa's, do we all get Bitcoin in our next stockings this year? We could send out a certificate for like 100,000th of a Bitcoin to everybody.
There you go.
So
what was her $17 up to?
Oh, I don't know. Didn't even look. I was like, there's just nothing I can do with that. Not much I can say, not much I can do, no advice I can give. There's just, it's like investing 50 cents in a stock in Robinhood. It's just, you got to start somewhere. So yay, good. Start.
Okay, good.
Keep it going.
Mm-hmm.
$50 a month over time. I tell all my kids, my students, if they want to be a millionaire by the time they're 65, give up one night of drinking a month and take the $50 and, invest it.
Well, hopefully it won't cost $50 anymore to have 2 drinks.
What? Oh, it's not far off.
Oh, listen.
Of course.
Airport in Charlotte, 2 drinks, $50.
Yep. The prices for them have just gotten stupid. Prices for a lot of things have just gotten stupid. So.
Yep.
All right. Anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts?
Yes. Can I go to bed now?
No.
I'm so tired.
Yeah, that's all I had, prepared for the night. I kind of want to drag this out so Ellen can't go to bed real quick. But
no, I'm so tired. Stop it.
But, we enjoyed being with you tonight. We appreciate y'all joining us. Hope you, got some information of value to you. Now, if you have something, questions or something you want us to cover, Tuesday or on another full-length show, email me, moffatonmoney@gmail.com, or DM me on Twitter, moffatonmoney.
Oh, Jeff Baker. Where have you been? Hey, man.
Hey, man. Good seeing you. It's been a hot minute. No, I have not. I have commented on the Musk case in Delaware. For those of you not familiar with that, Musk was sued in a Delaware court over his...
I'm going to let you finish this up because I'm exhausted. Jeff, that's not very nice to ask questions when I'm about to go to bed. All right. Have fun.
I'll be quick.
Enjoy.
Good night.
You're
Sweet
fun.
dreams.
I'm out. Good night. Sweet
Talk
dreams.
to you. Bye. Musk being the, major stockholder, Tesla, X, whatever, had a compensation plan that was challenged in the Delaware court, and the court ruled with the plaintiffs that the compensation was excessive. And so Musk is in the process of moving his companies out of Delaware into Texas. Okay, Delaware loses one company. Well, since that time, a number of other large companies, Delaware has been a haven for incorporation due to its quote unquote business favorable laws. But this court decision changed that whole perspective. And so a lot of companies now are moving out of Delaware, and Delaware's where they were quote unquote resided. So they would pay in taxes to Delaware. So there's a lot of money walking out of Delaware right now, and more is going to continue as more and more of these firms leave. So, we can talk about that in more detail, but in a nutshell, that's the situation as far as I'm aware. But yeah, he had a hell of a compensation package. I'm not going to argue that, but you look at what all this guy is doing simultaneously. He's running Tesla, he's running SpaceX, he's running X, he's running DOGE. He's got a drilling company that developed a machine to bore underground tunnels to make car tunnels, like in and around LA. He did a sample tunnel, and it, everything looks good. This is why we love Melissa. Melissa keeps us honest and balanced. He's an idiot. And Melissa's not alone in that opinion. So, but he has a way of making money. I'll put it that way. Even X is turning profitable 2 years later. A lot of people thought it would be a decade before he ever saw a dime out of that. But advertisers are returning, subscriptions, users are up, and it will actually probably this year make enough to cover the interest cost, which was significant. The banks just sold off some of the debt at 97 cents on the dollar, which is a pretty good price. 6 months, 8 months ago, they were hoping to get 60 cents on the dollar when they issued it. So they came out healthy. And that difference in price is just simply due to investor confidence in the future of X. So a lot of interesting things happening. Whether or not you agree with Musk or like him, I will say this: he's never boring. He is worth his weight in gold as far as just entertainment value. Different kind of guy, absolutely. I got a couple of people would like to hear more about this lawsuit, so I will add that to the agenda for Tuesday. How's that? And we can go into a little bit more detail and background on it. Be glad to do that. I appreciate the question. Because seriously, I want to talk about things y'all are interested in. And so if there is something that tickles your fancy or questions you have, seriously, would love to hear from you. Well, that's all I've got, for tonight. Before you go, if you will, please hit that like button, subscribe. It really helps us out in terms of expanding our reach. We need to get back to doing that. We've gotten a little lackadaisical over the past few months with all the moving and other stuff going on. And we want to build the channel, and we appreciate y'all and appreciate your help in the role you play in that. So we love you guys, members of the family. Good seeing y'all. Appreciate y'all being here tonight. We'll look forward to seeing you Tuesday night. And until then, I hope y'all have a great rest of the weekend. Blessings to you all. Our time is up. We thank you for yours. Good night, y'all.